Okay, so we're still Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa zurriyyatihi ajma'in. We're still looking at Harvey's conception of value and anti-value. So we'll just go over something we did last time. Harvey traces the irrational expansion of credit to the elimination of the gold standard in the early 70s. I think that's not the elimination of gold standard, that's the elimination of the dollar parity, I think. When the United States abandoned the metallic basis of the monetary system, bankers and financiers, so that's the post Bretton Woods system, metallic basis of the monetary system, bankers and financiers began to effectively create money. Yeah, I wanted to highlight this because this seems to be a major gap in his theory of value and anti-value, because in post Bretton Woods regime, the primary role of bank credit as a source of money creation is not taken into account, although he mentioned that they are not taken into account in theorization of his concepts of value and anti-value. Because when you are creating money out of the thin air, so when you create money, you are creating value in the capitalist sense of the word. Because money is a pure quantity in a capitalist system. Pure quantity in search of itself. So what Harvey, because Harvey seems to, according to this reviewer anyway, Harvey seems to see this process of the creation of money out of the thin air as something negative. And it might be negative in the long run if the system cannot be sustained and it is collapsed, but in itself it is the creation of value. So you can't, at least from a capitalist perspective, you can't see it as a negative value. It's a positive value, and this positivity is actually created out of nothing, out of the thin air. So it is de-linked from production system in a sense, the creation of money, and the only link it has with the production system is the long run, in the sense that whether the system can be sustained or not. So it's not the normal link, and I think that's a major gap. It seems to be a major lacuna in Harvey's conception of value and anti-value, as far as I understand it through this review up till this point. Okay, so the qualifications are necessary because we haven't looked at his own writings yet. So Harvey traces when the United States abandoned the metallic basis of the monetary system, basically that the abandonment of Bretton Woods, and financiers began to effectively create money, basically through lending. Profit no longer relied on production. That's true. And the relationship between money and the value become increasingly tenuous. Now this is the problem here, because as far as capitalism is concerned, money is value. So it's saying the relationship between money and value become or became increasingly tenuous. And here's the problem, because money is value. And what he should say here, or probably he wanted to say, is the relationship money and production becomes tenuous. So another, this is his Marxist bias in a sense. Bias of Marxist socialist capitalism is that it thinks that value is only created through production. And that might be true in itself, but from a capitalist perspective, and as long as you are in the journal, you don't reject capitalism as a system of accumulation, capitalism as a concept, which Marxists don't, then you can't argue for the production as the primary vehicle of the creation of value. Anyway, as far as capitalism is concerned, production is a means and actually also a hurdle, necessary, sort of a necessary link, but also a hurdle. That's why capitalism always is in search of a transcendence of production, because production put limitations or on the accumulation, the process of accumulation. That's why money is pure value in that sense. And money is sort of a transcendence of production as much as possible. Even though, you can't fully de-link value creation from production system. That's why, and hence the precarious nature of the whole financial system and whole money market and all that in post-Bretton Woods arrangement, post-Bretton Woods arrangements. Okay, so the relationship between money and value become increasingly tenuous. Should be relation between money and production becomes increasingly, because money is value in capitalism anyway. The logic of endless capital accumulation already required the perpetual expansion of surplus value production. But financialization transformed money into an infinite commodity that could be lent without limit in exchange for interest. That's true. So the money basically is, as we said, transcendence of the limits of production system, on the search for accumulation for the sake of accumulation. So that's how we can actually define capitalist money. So the capitalist money can be defined as money can be defined as capitalist money can be defined as the transcendence of the limits on accumulation inherent in capitalist production. So in that sense, financialization does that, transform money into an infinite commodity. So money in that sense is value. Money is bought, money is sold, money accumulate itself. And it's not just lending and borrowing, it's the creation of money out of the thin air. And that's the missing part in Harvey's explanation or Harvey's conceptualization. Whatever weight he wants to give the process of the creation of money out of thin air, he should, I think he does need to theorize it more centrally in his conception of value and anti-value. And when he says that the financial turns money into infinite commodity that could be lent without limits in exchange for interest, what is missing here is that modern debt is sort of the transcendence of modern debt is not truly a measure of borrowing between people, industries, or nations, but a direct feature or direct function of bank creating and supplying national and international money stocks. So modern debt is not primarily the debt which is lent or borrowed, but modern debt is the function of the creation of this money out of the thin air, and that's why it's non-self liquidating, and that is missing in Harvey's account. Let's look at it. Read this passage and then we'll look at it. As a result, the flow of credit becomes the principal and unrestrained driver of endless capital accumulation. Flow of credit, or rather creation of money. So borrowing language from Marx, Harvey notes that spiraling debt amplifies the madness of economic reason. So that's a good, it is madness, but the spiraling debt is not the mainly the debt created through lending and borrowing. It's the debt which creates the money and intensifies the crisis tendency that can only culminate in devaluation and destruction. That's why he his conception of the whole credit system as anti-value is based on his hope that or his hunch that the system is untenable and it will collapse. But that's just the hope, and like the old Marxist hope that can be dashed, because as Marx knew, the crisis tendencies are inherent in capitalism, but capitalism also rejuvenates itself and revitalizes itself after every crisis. So this destruction and ultimate devaluation cannot be the measure through which you, or cannot be the sole measure through which you determine the value or anti-value of money creation today. Okay, now let's look at his main problem. I think his whole conception of lending and credit, modern debt. Modern debt is not mainly the debt which arises from or is the measure of borrowing between people and nations. It's the debt which is a function of the creation of money. Money rather, which is the function of the debt. So he sort of does make a distinction between two types of debt, but his whole conception of debt is based on lending and borrowing. On the other hand, modern debt is linked to the creation of money mainly, and borrowing and lending system is subsumed under it or subservient to it. So what is missing in Harvey is a conception of the problem with Harvey's account is that his lending and borrowing are the main model for debt in his account. On the other hand, the creation of money is mostly seen as something negative, money through debt. But on the other hand, in post Bretton Woods system, creation of money is the direct function of debt. So debt is actually creating value. And this creation of value is not based on the model of lending and borrowing. So you are creating money out of thin air. And you're creating this money as a function of debt. Every debt actually create money out of nothing, and in that sense it is non-self liquidating. Because the self-liquidating debt is the borrowing and lending debt, because that debt pays for itself. And that's why it is a link to the production system and consumption and buying and selling. On the other hand, non-self-liquidating debt, which creates money, is sold. In there, money is created as a value and bought and sold and runs the whole system, financial system, and all financial system and money markets and all that. And the only measure of success of this is that it is sustainable. Of course, if the whole system is linked to production ultimately, but that link is tenuous, and hope is that this can be sustained through various crises. That's the capitalist hope. But the problem with Harvey's account is that he hasn't taken into account fully, as far as in this review, as far as we can see from this review, this whole different sort of debt, which directly creates money, the money which is not linked to lending and borrowing as such, the money which is created as a value in itself, which is bought and sold, etc., which is added to the system. The only thing for that sort of money is whether it can be sustained or not. Okay. I think that's the main, it seems to be a main lacuna for so far anyway. We still have some way to go, a few more paragraphs in this, so maybe he has discussed this further. But from this paragraph, or what we have read so far, what I can see is that he doesn't have a full grip on this concept. So Harvey borrowing language from Marx and Harvey talks about amplify the economics and intensify the crisis tendencies that can only culminate in devaluation and destruction. Yes, but if that devaluation and destruction can, revitalize the system, and you can go back to, and those losses can be easily, recouped or transcended, as we have seen, as long as we can keep creating money out of thin air and can sustain the system. Of course, if the system cannot be sustained, then that would be huge anti-value. But that's just fear and hope, whatever it is. We can base our evaluation of the value and anti-value on that. Okay, let's stop here and we'll continue.